the Masters in Arts in ALG is Applied Research Group. Okay? So it's a talk by the PILAG. And Anna, I mean, if you want to say something about yourself, I know a lot because I read your CV more than once, but you better give your own story. I think it's better if you say who you are and what to do. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. Well, my name is Ana Salvi, and I teach here Spanish and English, EAP, and I also taught at Warwick University, usually in the summer, and in some short courses, English for academic purposes. I am from Argentina, and I've been in the UK for the last 4 years working on EAP and Spanish as well. And today I'm going to report on my MA dissertation, the research I did, which is integrating a pedagogy for autonomy with exploratory practice. And so my master's dissertation was narrated as a story, and so this is the way I'm going to present it, hopefully. So when I learned about learner autonomy, so that was some years ago when I started my MA course at Warwick, and I saw a video, I watched a video by Lenny Dunn at Warwick, and I was really impressed by what I was watching, let's say, which was a class with these characteristics. Basically, all the students were working in groups. They were taking decisions, making decisions. Come in. Yes. The class was really well structured. So the students would set goals. Then the lecturer would go around and ask them how they were going to do that plan, what they were going to do, and they started doing it. And after a while, the teacher would go around the groups and would ask them again and would guide them whenever it was necessary. After that, they would present it to the rest of the class and they would evaluate it. There was a very good rapport between the teacher and the students, and they felt, I could see that they were in control. The teacher was simply observing them and guiding them when it was necessary, but they were in control. They were the center. There were posters on the walls everywhere of work that the students had done, and the students had different options, let's say, of what to do. So they had to decide what to do, but usually for some students it's not very easy to decide what to do. So the teacher would give them options and then they could choose whether they liked them or not. And something important as well, there were, or I was surprised at seeing, there was lots of different material on the tables. So dictionaries on the tables, books. So they could use them at any time, and they were using them. And they were also reflecting. They were encouraged in this lesson to reflect at the end of the class in writing, to think of what they did, what they learned, and what they would like to do the following class, or what they had to do that they haven't finished or they hadn't finished that day. So in a way, I was really... I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, because my lessons back in Argentina were more teacher-centered. And I always in the past used to ask myself, why is it that some students are more engaged in some lessons more than in mine? And so suddenly I started thinking, maybe it's because I wasn't giving them control. And so after that, I decided to go to a talk by Lenny Dunn in Brighton, it was. And because I wanted to meet all the people who were doing learner autonomy in this way. And there I also met Dickel Wright, who started talking about exploratory practice. So this was something different, but it was in this workshop where the main topic was learner autonomy. So I could see that there was a link between learner autonomy and exploratory practice, and I really liked what he was adding, let's say. Exploratory practice, well, in fact, I really liked at the beginning that he was very informal, and he's a very prestigious academic, and he was presenting pictures rather than a normal PowerPoint. So everything was really different and innovative. And so he explained what exploratory practice is, which is basically a kind of research. Research done by the teacher, but also involving the learners. So I really like this idea as well. In learner autonomy, learners were suddenly the center, and in this kind of research, the learners were given a voice as well. So, do you know what exploratory practice is? You do. Okay. So here is a definition in one sentence, let's say, which appears in this book by Dick Allwright and Judith Hanks. So it's working collegially to understand what they want to understand following their own agendas. Not necessarily in order to bring about change. And so this is connected to action research, which is usually associated to changing, working or researching for change. So exploratory practice makes a difference and says, well, this is not necessarily to change, but to understand better. Not primarily by changing, but by using normal pedagogic practices as investigative tools, so that working for understanding is part of the teaching and learning. In a way that does not lead to burnout, but that is indefinitely sustainable, in order to contribute to teaching and learning and to development. Yes, of course. Thank you. And there are also, apart from the definition in one sentence, what are very, very important are these principles. These principles guide this kind of research. And there are 7, sometimes 6, according to the edition you read. So the first one is focus on quality of life as a main issue. So that's the main issue. Work to understand something, right, issues, before thinking about solving problems. Then the who issues. Who are going to investigate? Who are going to get involved in research? Everybody, teachers, learners, as practitioners developing their own understanding. Work to bring people together in a common enterprise. Work cooperatively for mutual development. And how to do this? Well, make it a continuous enterprise and minimize the burden by integrating the work for understanding into normal pedagogic practices. Right. So, any questions so far? I will give examples. So this is what I read, and this book, very quickly, and I could see that these two, learner autonomy and exploratory practice, were different because one was pedagogy and the other was research, but they had elements in common. So I decided that I wanted to investigate this combination in an EAP course that I was going to teach in the summer.
Yeah, a lot of master singers were thinking about how to choose them. And so what, example, you already explained a bit, but when did you actually click you want to do this? What made you choose?
Thank you, yes. At the very beginning of my MA course, I learned about, in a lecture, we watched this video by Lenny Tam, and I started thinking, oh, I like this. And so I wrote an assignment on learner autonomy. I started reading and going to conferences. And after that, I learned about EP, exploratory practice. And I started reading again, and I said, well, now this is what I want to investigate. So my two research questions were, I wanted to know what the learners, or how the learners perceive this innovation of combining these two, let's say, this kind of pedagogy with this kind of research. And then I wanted to see how I could combine these. Because all the book I had read about exploratory practice gave examples, but they never said really how you go into a class and start teaching or doing research. So it was all new to me. So the context was, as I said, a pre-sessional course for 5 weeks. So they had, every day they had lessons. 17 graduate students, between 23 and 30, from different parts of the world. And this was an academic reading and writing course. They had another teacher who was helping them with speaking and listening especially. But obviously in my class they did lots of speaking, lots of listening as well. And finally they had to write a written assignment at the end. This was the class. So, very nice, everybody. We had a very nice class as well. So, my research plan at the moment, at that time, as I said, was to promote autonomy by encouraging collaboration and cooperation so that they work together and they help each other to solve issues, to find answers to questions, to provide them with options, right, so that they could choose, they could be in control, they could take charge of their learning, and eliciting the verbalization of their plans. So I would go around and I would ask them, what are you doing, or what have you planned to do? And they were, at the beginning, little by little, they started explaining. So I wouldn't say anything, really. They were talking all the time. And I would promote reflection in writing. So at the end of the class, I asked them to, every class, to write what they learned, what they have done, and what they would do the following day, or a kind of plan for the future. And in order to, and also I wanted to involve them in researching their own learning lives. So this has to do with EP. So the data I gathered, what they did was, and I picked up their daily diaries. I picked only 8, but I could have picked all of them, really. And I analyzed them all. Well, their weekly feedback by email. So at the end of the week, I asked them to send me an email and with a reflection of what they like of the class, what they think could be better. And so I would, in a way, take all that into account and then try to suggest those changes. I have their presentations. I collected their presentations, so the posters and some of the videos. And of course, interviews. And a year later, I contacted them again by email, and I asked them some questions, such as, what do you remember? 3 questions. What do you remember what we did? What do you remember? And the other question, what do you remember and why? So, and I got 10 responses, probably because those other 7 were not at the university anymore, didn't have that email address, or for some other reason. So one example, these are the things that we would do almost every day, with different topics, obviously. But for example, they had a text and they had to analyze it. So obviously all the texts we were working with were from their department. So they were studying engineering and business. So I contacted the department. I got the text they need to read, and then I brought them to the classroom, and they could choose what text and what to do. So choosing a topic, so I would give them some options, and then they had to investigate it by using books. So I tried to bring books to the class, as many as I could. The internet, dictionaries, Many of them had iPads in the classroom. Right. And then sharing their understandings and then presenting those understandings to the rest of the class and to evaluate the presentation. So this was the way we were working, and they felt really that they were in control in a way. And this is an example of an EP session, an exploratory practice session. So they could explore wider puzzles, right? Such as one day I arrived to the class and I said, well, why don't we explore today some issues connected to either to your learning or something else that is worrying you at the moment and you think that might have an impact in your studies. And so they came up in groups with these 4 questions. And usually in EP, because the idea is to understand better, so we would encourage everybody to write why questions. So why do most students prefer living in Leamington Spa to living in or around the university? They were hearing that. This is not something that I said. They were hearing that. And so they really wanted to understand that. They were going to choose where to live for a year. So it was an important issue, and they were worried about that during the pre-sessional course. Why are we here? Some of them, were really good at English, and they were wondering, why are we here? Sorry. Why are we so sleepy in certain classes? That's a very typical question. Why is it hard to come up with a good idea for a written project? Because the project they had to do it outside of the class, and they had to decide on a topic. And they were finding it really hard. And this is finding answers, interviewing classmates. So they would go around, presenting their findings, so they could use posters or PowerPoint presentations. And then disseminating their understandings to other classes. I remember Maeve was one of the teachers, and she participated. So then you can say something if you want about it.
Yeah, Anna and I, and there was another teacher with us. We decided that each one of us would have similar to these issues that we are going to discuss in our classes, because we were teaching, all the 3 of us were teaching on the same course. So I had my students to decide on a topic that they want to explore, and they interviewed each other, found answers for what they wanted to do, and then we agreed to meet in Anna's class, because she had the biggest classroom we could ever think of, and then they displayed their results. So the 3 classrooms, they mixed together, discussed their findings. They had to look at how even they came up to do their posters. And I remember, others telling, oh, that's a very innovative way to work on a poster. And then they started to discuss the ideas that they put in it. Now, it was very interesting, because we got them all talking in English, interacting with each other, and finding why it is important to do research.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Okay. So some of the results from this analysis, from the analysis of this data, in a way answered my first research question, which was, how do students perceive this innovation? And so these are some, but learners felt in control via interacting or collaborating. Learners felt in control by reflecting and writing. This is something that they said. I didn't pick up examples because it would be too long, but I am happy to do that. If you're interested, you can drop me an email. Students' views on research, and most of them said that it was very useful. They found it really useful to do this kind of research for the future. The interaction between the teacher and the learners, they all said that it was really important, that they felt confident and taken into account. And many of them said that they realized that life was the big issue, that this class was not only about academic English, but about life. And I think that that was the aim of all this. Because above all, we are human beings, so they had other issues that were really important. That was my view. And then joy was another salient feature. They all said how happy they were working together, and they really enjoyed the experience. And the lessons to be learned, or that I learned, after analyzing all the data, in a way, were the answer to my second question. My second question was, how can I integrate these two practices in a way? This kind of pedagogy with this kind of research. And I only found that at the very end of the process, when I was even writing the report, the dissertation. So, the lessons. Integration between pedagogy and research. So, what I learned is that even though I tried to do this without having much information, I realized that some of the tools I used for this research, such as their emails, their weekly emails, their reflections in their diaries, their interviews, I was using that. I was the researcher. And in a way, EP, exploratory practice, involves the learners as well to use the same tools. And this is something I realize now at the very end, that I should have encouraged them to have a look at their reflections and pick an issue from those reflections, because there were lots of issues that they were raising, and I was not coming back to them properly, really, because I didn't realize at the moment. So I think that by reflecting, they can pick an issue and start analyzing those issues and exploring those issues in order to understand them while they are doing the class, while they are in the class. Is that clear? Okay. Another lesson was that all research participants must be aware of the EP principles. So again, when I started the research, I didn't really want to show them the principles, because I thought that was not going to help. But at the very end, I realized that if everyone should be involved, the students have the same rights as I do to know the principles that guide their research in the classroom. So I think that is very important from now on, when I get involved again into this kind of research, to let them know of the principles that will guide their research in the classroom. Another one is that puzzles, the difference between puzzles to be explored and problems to be solved. I realized that this was a mistake that I made as well, and I transmitted to the students as well. Some of my questions, when they had to reflect or in the interviews, were, what would you change? Wrong. This is not EP. So I realized that if I asked, what would you change, I was encouraging them to quickly think of something they think was wrong and they should have changed. And the idea of exploratory practice is to take that issue and, without considering it a problem, and trying to exploring to see if it's really necessary to change it or not. And this helped me a lot. In a class the other day, I remember that immediately I asked them, so what did you like of the course and what would you change? And then I said, well, no. And what would you like to explore later? And so they came with, well, I would like to do this differently. And I said, okay, yes, but maybe some other people might think differently, and maybe you can be right or maybe not. So maybe this would be good to explore further. And in a way, it's a way of, for teachers who are reluctant to accept that they need to change something or that they have done something wrong, I think it's a good way of dealing with this. I am one, of course. And finally, the value of getting involved in research. As I said before, I tried this, and it was only at the very end that I could see the value of it. I mean, during the course, obviously, I could see the value. I could see how students were developing themselves. I was developing myself as well. But at the very end of the process, I could learn how to integrate these two together. And in a way, I could realize that exploratory practice is an overarching, let's say, frame that involves or includes, or could include, a pedagogy for autonomy. So, in a way, it's a superordinate element, and what gives us is, let's say, as I said before, a framework to guide our practice and our research, and its purpose is to understand better. And life is a big issue, so all comes back to the principles of EP, which, if we look at them, seem very simple and very easy to understand, but then when we have to put them in practice, it becomes tricky. So, well, these are my lessons and the lessons I learned. So thank you very much for this. And here is the list of references. If you're interested, I can share these with you. So questions are welcome. Thank you very much. Yes. Yeah. Hi.
Because you were doing this in the context of a pre-sessional class,
Yeah.
was there any difficulty integrating what you wanted to do into whatever the requirements were, the syllabus for that course?
That's a very good question, and it wasn't difficult at all because in the institution where I was working, they are not very prescriptive, so I was lucky in that respect. So we have a list of content that we have to cover, but we are not told what to do every day or every week. So we can do. So I used all that material, and but I used it in the learners explore those contents in different ways whenever they really needed to explore those contents. Yeah, that's a very good question. Yes.
Yeah, when you mentioned the student's question, why are we here? You followed that with a statement, and some of them already had very good English. Were you suggesting that some of them thought their English was already good enough to succeed on a degree course, and that they didn't really need to be on the pre-sessional course?
No. I never said anything. It was just them who were in groups. I gave them 1 or 2 minutes to think of any question that they wanted to explore, some doubts that way they would have, and they came up with this question out of the blue. I mean, I never guided them to think of anything at all.
No, but I mean, when you made that statement, they came up with the question, why?
Yes.
And you followed that then by saying some of them already had very good English, or some of them spoke very good English. I wondered if you were suggesting that some of those students thought that their English was already good enough, that they didn't need to do a pre-sessional English course.
Well, maybe they thought that, but I don't know. What they did was.
I think Ellen wants to ask you, were they converted in the end, that there was value added?
No, I mean, they came up with that question like that. I didn't help them to turn it into a why question. It wasn't a statement.
I think it's were they convinced by you that even if they thought they were too good to be in your class, they learned something at the end?
Or do the students have an inflated view of their own proficiency in English?
Maybe.
Did they answer that?
Well, basically what they did was this. They were thinking of other things, so why it was important for them to be there. So not only to learn, to improve, strengthen the language ability, so here it is, but also to socialize, to travel, and to learn about England, let's say, you know, a different environment, a different place. So
So yeah, I mean that shows that they were converted in the end. They believed that it was useful.
yeah,
And language becomes shrunk in the corner there.
yes, they put everything. Yeah, they put everything in the same level in a way. So language was one more thing. Academic English, as they said before, was one more aspect of what they were learning, but there were other things that motivated them to be there as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just wondering, because on the EAP pre-sessional courses, I'm doing it at Warwick, but here on our one you get quite a lot of freedom as to how you want to teach.
Yes.
And, you know, try various things out, and you can make it very student-orientated or exploratory and autonomous and whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like a nice little bubble. But I was wondering, because you also do Spanish, and this is Advantage. So how does it translate, like how specific is this kind of radical approach to, like how specific is it to these kind of programs where you get postgraduate students and you get intense contact and all these other factors? Like how are these factors essential to that working, and how much can you bring into your Spanish?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think that is all a matter of time. I think that in an EAP course, in a pre-sessional course, you usually have more time to explore these things if you have some freedom. But usually in a 10-week course, like the Spanish one or even the English one I am teaching at the moment, it's only a 10-week course, I find it really hard to include these other aspects of understanding your own issues outside. So, but what I include of all these is everything should be guided by understanding and not necessarily changing or improving. Because we live in this kind of world in which everything seems to be a problem and we simply need to change it or to solve it immediately. So the idea is that students start thinking that it's not about changing directly, but thinking and trying to understand. So I try to apply that, you know, without necessarily asking them to explore why questions. So that is always there.
Can I just go back to that bit about the postgraduate, undergraduate thing? Do you think that's a big issue? Do you think you could do this with undergraduates?
I think I could, yes. Obviously it will be perhaps more difficult, but again, it is just a matter of time. Because if you are with it for a long time with them, I am sure that they will. In fact, I tried this as well with teenagers. I didn't show it today because it was going to be too long. But I did the same before doing the course at Warwick. I did one with teenagers. It was a summer school, and it worked really well as well. So they were really surprised and really motivated to go out of the class and interview people and talk to their classmates to get information. Even these students said, "Can't believe it how deep you can go by asking a very simple question that we would never ask." And I think that also this idea of asking and daring to explore, in a way, gives them confidence that their questions might seem simple and silly, but in reality they are not. And gives them confidence to speak up in any subject, I guess.
Could there be a friction between exploratory practice and the ethics requirements in a university which doesn't let you go out and interview people?
Well, I tried that as well in one Spanish course I was teaching last year. They were very good students of Spanish, and I tried to. Yes, here. I did. Yes.
Anna,
No, they didn't leave
less
the.
experience to do that.
No. They didn't leave the classroom, but I asked them to do it outside of the classroom, and some of them sent email to teachers, to their own lecturers, to answer their questions. They wanted to know, for example, why. This is another question. Why is it that we cannot get 100% in our assignments? And that might seem silly, but I think it is very important. Students need to understand some questions they have, and so what they did was to send emails to.
But the teachers that we got those emails, then we were in a hard place.
Yes.
So we didn't know what to answer.
Anna, this is a very interesting idea, but next time you come and talk to me first, because we have to clear ethics to do that. So anybody here who is even thinking for the masters to go and send emails or interview people outside the classroom, come and see me first, please, and I'll explain the ins and outs of the beautiful ethical system we have.
Yes, but the idea was also that students, let's say, explore these ethic issues, and that they can go there and try to find where they are, read them, and they should be empowered as well at university. So I think that it is important to let them know that they can find the information and encourage them to do that. So, yeah.
They were students of Spanish, or were they
No.
Spanish students?
No. They were learning Spanish. They were English.
But they were doing their research through the medium of Spanish, or
Yes,
or in
yes, in Spanish. They were doing the research in Spanish. Yeah. Yes. So
it would be there's a proficiency issue. I think we were talking about Ad Plus Vantage here earlier
yes,
on. And,
yes,
you know, you were saying that the constraint on time means the model probably wouldn't work.
yes,
But also a lot of the Ad Plus Vantage students are really rather low level, so I can't imagine
Yes.
doing much in the way of research through that language. That
right. This course I have just mentioned was not an Advantage module. With the Advantage modules, I find it really hard to try to, especially now that it is only 10 weeks. In the past, it used to be longer, so then it gives you the opportunity to explore a little bit more. But yes, whenever I can, I try to not to forget of trying that the aim I would like to find in my teaching and in my research is to understand rather than to change or to improve. This idea of improvement that students have in their minds, and they cannot even think, and they are just thinking, oh, we have to improve. So I think it is important to encourage students to think first and to understand before thinking of solving issues or thinking of improvement.
So they had to seek to improve
Simon,
their.
got me at first.
Sorry.
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 Okay, next.
Yeah. There are always students who doesn't want to participate in group work. So, and this is student-centered approach. Yeah. So, how do you encourage students who doesn't want to participate in this group
To be
work?
honest, I didn't have even one.
You didn't have, but probably, yeah, you are lucky perhaps this time. But
No, because that happened to me in the past. In the past, when I didn't use this, there were lots of students who didn't want to participate. But since I started doing this, students naturally, because they are placed in pairs or in threes, and they are guided very well on what to do, and they really feel good that they really want to participate.
like, for example, I'm from Japan.
Yeah.
Japanese teaching is quite different from Western
Yes.
English teaching, and they do listen and write. But they don't, well, some exceptions, but most of the people doesn't want to do group work and stuff. They are not trained like that. So how?
Yes, that's an issue that is usually raised in every learner autonomy workshop. So what do we do with these students who are not ready to take responsibility over their own learning? And so it is an issue. For me, so far it has worked. But usually, I would say, what happened, for example, when these students got in groups of 4 or 5 to explore the why questions. I remember that there was one student, and I learned this at the very end when I was reading, when I was listening, in fact, to what he said in the interview. He didn't like it. He didn't feel that he wanted to explore his own question, and he had to work with this question of why is it hard to come up with a good idea for our project, because that was a question of the group, but he really didn't feel identified with that. So I think that that's why EP is important. If I had read that at the time, and if I, what I would have done is to suggest that he explores that. So why is it that because he had the opportunity to choose his own question. So by talking with the student, or by helping them or allowing them, promoting them to use their reflections and to explore those issues, then they can understand all these things better and they can feel better in the classroom. So this is what I found out at the end. All these issues, that they had, maybe prevented them from enjoying the course even more.
Okay. Can I just say, I know someone's going to ask a question. I also know some people want to go to Emma's class for the masters. So could it be a quick question, Simon, then we wrap up?
It sort of answered itself.
Okay. All right. So can we thank Anna for a very stimulating session?
Oh, thank you.
And if you have questions for Anna, she's on email. And if you are interested in exploratory practice, ask Marina first if it can be done, and then we'll talk about it, ethics-wise. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Marina.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.